Senator Cruz, thank you for joining us today.
It's good to be with you, Walt. Thanks for having me.
You know, a lot of Texans I'm hearing say they're worried about inflation, the housing market, interest rates, and a possible recession. What would you say to fearful Texans that, that are worried about the economy?
Well, listen, I think there's a clear mandate from the election in November, a mandate across the board, a mandate to secure the border, a mandate to bring down inflation, a mandate to restart the economy, a mandate to unleash American energy, a mandate to unleash small businesses across Texas and across the country. And one of the things we saw on January 20th with a new president is an end to the war on American energy that was coming from Washington, that was coming from the Biden administration. And that, I believe, is going to result in substantially more energy production right here in Texas. And we're going to reassert American leadership in energy and American dominance in energy, and that is going to lower energy prices and have, I believe, a very positive effect on inflation as well.
That is a good thing for Texas, of course, when it comes to energy, but the president talking about tariffs today on auto parts, wine from the EU. Tariffs are a concern for Texans, too, paying more at the dinner table. Are we going to see an ease in that, or do you think that the other countries are going to come to a deal here? I mean, I know some of these are delayed until later in April, but a lot of people are worried about that.
Well, listen, if you look at President Trump and tariffs, it's clear he uses tariffs for multiple different purposes. One purpose that he uses tariffs and the threat of tariffs is as leverage to get other countries to do what we want them to do to act in America's interest. And I think the clearest example of that is the threatened tariff against Mexico and against Canada unless they do more to assist in securing our border. Now, in that regard, I emphatically support that objective. I think no state has paid a bigger price for the open borders we've seen the last 4 years than has the state of Texas. And so I am completely supportive of everything the president is doing to secure the border. Secondly, however, the president also likes tariffs. He's very clear about that. We've all heard him say that he thinks tariff is the most beautiful word in the English language. I can tell you, Walt, what I've urged the president on this front. I've urged him two things. Number one, focus on China. I think everything we can do to delink our economy from China is a good step. I view China as the greatest geopolitical threat facing the United States for the next 100 years. Number two, what I've urged the president is focus on reciprocity. And the reason I've focused on reciprocity and urged the president to do so is I believe in free trade. And a focus on reciprocity puts a downward ratchet on tariffs. It means if another country doesn't like the tariffs that the administration has imposed, they have an avenue to respond, and that avenue is to lower the tariffs they're putting on American goods. So my hope is we're supposed to see on April 2nd the administration is going to roll out their proposed tariff plan, and they are saying it is focused on reciprocity. So that's the outcome I hope we see, is I hope we see tariffs going down everywhere and American farmers and ranchers and manufacturers being able to export our goods and services.
Yeah, the president says he's tired of seeing the U.S. getting ripped off. I wanted to ask you about what happened in Austin yesterday. Austin police recovered incendiary devices at a Tesla dealership.
Yeah.
What is going on here? You know, this dealership in North Austin is selling cars, and they're finding things that could explode or cause fires. What's your take on what's going on? Is this a terrorist act? And what's the message that we need to send?
Listen, I think it is unequivocally domestic terrorism. We have seen 9 different states Tesla dealerships targeted. We have seen them firebombed. We've seen Molotov cocktails thrown at Tesla dealerships. We've seen gunfire, bullets fired into dealerships. And we've seen now this incendiary device, this bomb at the dealership in Austin. This is dangerous. Somebody's going to get killed. And it's, look, we all have experienced the last 10 years and the reaction that some people, particularly congressional Democrats, have to Donald Trump. I think Trump derangement syndrome is a real thing where they lose their mind. They hate Donald Trump so much that it consumes them. And there's now a new variant of it. It's a kissing cousin of that disease that I'm calling Elon derangement syndrome. And the same congressional Democrats who hate Trump, they now hate Elon Musk. You know, just 5 years ago, Elon Musk was a hero of the left, He was the biggest electric car manufacturer in the world. He was saving the environment. And yet, because he came out and supported President Trump, they've now decided that he is the devil. And I got to say, this domestic terrorism we're seeing is with the cheering on and active encouragement of many on the left. And I believe we've already seen the Department of Justice arrest 3 different people for carrying out domestic terrorism targeting Tesla. I think you're going to see the FBI and the Department of Justice investigate, and anyone conducting this terrorism, anyone funding this terrorism, anyone facilitating this terrorism, I think they're going to get charged and prosecuted. And it really is, it's an unfortunate thing when you see so many Washington Democrats that rather than supporting a positive policy agenda, that they're just consumed by hatred and rage.
It's sad to see, especially it's so close to neighborhoods over there in North Austin, for sure.
Yeah.
Governor Greg Abbott, on his agenda this legislative session is getting the school vouchers passed.
Yes.
And the president wants to dismantle the Department of Education. Education clearly is not where it needs to be here in the United States. It's actually in a sad state of affairs in a lot of places. Where do we need to go? Is school vouchers the right step? A lot of people are calling it, in Texas, the Democrats are, it's a scam on education. Where do we need to go to get back to where we need to be?
Well, listen, I believe school choice is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. I've spent, Walt, literally 30 years fighting for school choice. And you know, if you look at it in Texas and across the country, the rich have always had school choice. If you're wealthy, you can either choose to live in a neighborhood that has great public schools, and many people do that. Or if you live in a neighborhood that doesn't have great public schools, if you're rich, you've got the money to pay tuition and send your kids to private schools. What school choice is about is giving low-income parents the same ability to choose a good future for their kids that the rich have always had. And I'm really excited. So last week I was down in Austin. I went to the state legislature. I went to the state legislature to thank the House Republicans who are taking this up and to encourage them to stand up and do the right thing. I think Texas is on the verge of passing the biggest and most significant school choice program in the entire country, and I think that is an incredible victory for Texans. You know, if you look at the Hispanic community and the African American community in Texas and everywhere else, overwhelming majorities of Hispanics and overwhelming majorities of African Americans support school choice. In the polling, sometimes it's 60%, 70%, sometimes it's as high as 80%. And the reason is many of the failing schools are in low-income neighborhoods, and they disproportionately harm Hispanic children and African American children. And I believe every child in Texas deserves access to an excellent education, regardless of their race or their ethnicity or their wealth or their zip code. And so I am cheering on the state legislature. I'm cheering on Governor Abbott for this legislation, which I think is the single most important thing the state legislature can take up and pass this session.
Speaking of Governor Abbott, before I let you go, Democratic Representative Jasmine Crockett called our governor a Hot Wheels. You know, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a joke before I researched it. What do you think about that comment? And she says Democrats need to do more punching in their races against Republicans. Your take on that comment?
Well, listen, and in fact, the comment about punching, she specifically identified me and called for physical violence against me. You're seeing more and more of this. As I mentioned, the Democrats, it's really unfortunate seeing in Washington that they're consumed by hatred and rage. They're willing to look the other way and even cheer on political violence. This same Congresswoman also called for people to stand up and strike out at Tesla, and they're cheering on this domestic terrorism. You know, I think back to a few weeks ago to the State of the Union address, and I think President Trump gave a phenomenal speech. I think it's the best speech I've ever seen him give. It was very much focused on the promises he made in November and the results that the administration is already delivering, including reducing illegal border crossings by over 95%. I mean, it is incredible successes we're seeing in the first 2 months. And I got to tell you, Walt, I've been to 13 State of the Union addresses since I was elected to the Senate. This was the first one that nobody from the opposing party stood or applauded. They all begin with the Sergeant at Arms calling out, "The President of the United States." And everyone stands up and applauds. And you know what? Everyone I've been to, when Barack Obama was president, I stood up and applauded. When Joe Biden was president, I stood up and applauded because I respect the office and I respect the voters who elected the president. When they introduced Donald Trump, every Democrat sat there stone-faced, refused to applaud, and the entire speech they refused to applaud. They refused to applaud for the parents of children who had been murdered by violent criminal illegal aliens. They refused to applaud for a 13-year-old boy from Texas struggling with brain cancer. And right now their party, instead of coming together and fighting to solve problems that are impacting America, they are consumed by hatred for President Trump. And it really is sad. It's unfortunate. I hope they put their hatred behind him. To see Jasmine Crockett mocking Governor Abbott because he's in a wheelchair, because he's disabled, look, I mean, that's just gross. And it shows where so many of these congressional Democrats are coming from.
And one last question. What is going on with the Signal app text chain? More information came out today. It's disturbing, to say the least. Maybe just an honest mistake, but that can't happen.
Yeah. Look, it was clearly a screw-up. As you know, I do a podcast every week. It's called Verdict with Ted Cruz. Actually, last week I did an hour-long one-on-one interview with Elon Musk that was fascinating. Today's podcast is all on the Signal app screw-up. And it was obviously a mistake. The National Security Advisor inadvertently added a journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg, to a thread. Signal is an encrypted messaging app. It's used by a lot of people in government. It's used by a lot of journalists to communicate. And it was a national security thread that this journalist got added by mistake. And listen, every one of us has mistakenly texted someone the wrong thing. I mean, we've all messed up. Rarely is it in such a visible context where a journalist keeps records and publishes a story. That was a screw-up. I'm confident that screw-up's not going to happen again. I will say this, though. If you actually look through and read the substantive texts that were going back and forth, and I've read them, what they were talking about and what they were implementing was strong policy that protects America. In particular, it was military strikes against the Houthis, who are radical Islamic terrorists. They are funded by Iran, and they have been waging terrorism against Americans, against American shipping companies, and against shipping through the Suez Canal. And I'll tell you, Texans are paying higher prices at the grocery store and the department store because the terrorism of the Houthis is massively driving up the cost of shipping. And for 4 years, Joe Biden and the Democrats did nothing. And what President Trump authorized was a military strike to take out the terrorists who are attacking Americans and American shipping. That is a strong commander-in-chief defending America. And so, yes, it's an embarrassing screw-up that a journalist was on the thread, but the underlying substance, I actually think, is cause for celebration of a strong president protecting the country.
Senator Cruz, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to check out your podcast. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Walt.